Opening, the 3 seconds that can change everything. The phone lights up on the table, a name you did not expect. You read the message once. Then again, slower, as if the second reading will change the words. It does not. Your chest tightens. Your thumbs find the keyboard before your judgment finds the room. A reply forms and you send it, and in the moment it feels like the only honest thing to do. 20 minutes later, the thread has tripled in length. The tone has hardened on both sides. What started as one careless sentence has become a small war, and you are no longer sure who started it, only that you are now fighting to win something you never wanted. 2 hours later, you reread your own messages. The anger that wrote them has cooled, and what is left is a quieter, more honest voice asking why you said the things you said. The original message was annoying. It was not, in the end, what caused most of the damage. The reaction was. Hold that thought, because it is the whole book in one image. Between the message arriving and your reply leaving, there was a space. It felt like it did not exist. It felt like you had no choice. But it was there. 3 seconds, maybe less. And inside those 3 seconds, everything that followed was quietly decided. Most of us have been taught to treat our first reaction as the only possible reaction. A provocation arrives, and the response fires the way a foot jerks when the doctor taps the knee. We call it honesty. We call it standing up for ourselves. Sometimes we even call it strength, but very often it is only a habit that moves faster than our thinking. This audiobook is about that space. Not the message, not the person who sent it, not the insult or the injustice. The space, the 3 seconds, the gap between what happens to you and what you do next. You do not need to become a calmer person in your bones to change your life. You do not need to feel less. You need to get better at what happens after the feeling shows up. The feeling is not the enemy. The automatic obedience to the feeling is. There is a version of you that already knows this. The one who, an hour after the fight, can see exactly where a single breath would have changed everything. This book is how you bring that version of you into the first 3 seconds, where it actually matters. Everything that follows is practical, not philosophical. We are going to build a skill you can use tonight. Chapter 1. Why we react before we think. The human brain is built to protect before it understands. Long before we had language, we had reflexes. Something moves in the grass. You do not analyze it. You flinch. That flinch kept our ancestors alive. The ones who stopped to debate the rustling were removed from the gene pool. A fast reaction was, for most of our history, a survival skill. So a quick reaction is not a flaw. It is a feature that once kept us alive. The trouble is that the world which shaped that feature has changed, but the feature stayed. Your nervous system still treats a rude email almost like a moving predator. It cannot easily tell the difference between a threat to your body and a threat to your pride, because to the older parts of the brain, an injury to the ego and an injury to the body set off the same alarm. This is why you can be sitting safely in a chair, alone, fed, and comfortable, and still feel your body surge as if you are in danger, because someone on the internet disagreed with you. The body does not know it is Tuesday. It only knows the alarm went off. The first thing to understand is that your reaction is not evidence you are weak. It is evidence you are ancient. The wiring is older than your name, older than your language, older than the situation that triggered it. You are not broken. You are well built for a world that no longer exists. But here is the part that matters. The alarm is automatic. The action that follows is not. Between the alarm and the action, a different system can speak, the part of you that can say, "Not yet." That part is quieter than the alarm, and it loses if you let the alarm run the entire show. The work of this book is to make that quieter voice arrive sooner. We are not trying to delete the reaction. We are trying to insert a comma between the reaction and the reply. A comma is enough. A comma is where freedom lives. People imagine emotional mastery as a total rewrite of who they are. It is not. It is punctuation. One small pause placed at the right moment changes the whole sentence. Think of the last time you said something you regretted. Not the worst thing, just the last thing. Go back to it in your mind. Where was the comma? Was there one at all? Most people cannot find it because they were not looking for it. They were looking at the other person, the insult, the unfairness. They were everywhere except in the 3 seconds that were actually theirs. You cannot manage what you do not notice. So the first skill is not control, it is noticing. You cannot insert a pause into a reaction you experience as instant. You have to slow the experience down inside your own mind first, and the only way to do that is to start catching the reaction while it is still happening, not 2 hours later in the shower. That is the real beginning, not breathing exercises, not affirmations. Just the quiet, almost boring decision to notice the moment your body decides for you. Chapter 2: The Hidden Cost of Instant Reactions. When we add up the damage of reacting fast, we usually count the big explosions. The shouted argument, the fired-off email, the relationship that ended in a single heated night. Those are real, but they are not the whole cost. The larger cost is structural. It is the slow erosion of how people experience you. Every time you react instantly, you teach the people around you something, that your buttons are easy to press, and that pressing them produces a predictable show. Some people will avoid you. Some will learn to manage you. And some, the ones we will spend real time on later, will start to press those buttons on purpose. A person who reacts instantly is a person other people can steer, not because they are foolish, because their responses are visible before their judgment is. When someone can predict your reaction, they can provoke exactly the reaction they want. You become a character in their story instead of the author of your own. Consider the cost at work. A manager who replies to every challenge with defensiveness trains the team to stop bringing problems. The problems do not vanish. They go underground where they rot. A parent who meets every mistake with immediate anger teaches the child to lie fluently. The child is not becoming bad. The child is learning that honesty has a cost and avoidance is safer. The instant reaction built the architecture of the whole relationship, and neither side chose it on purpose. There is also the internal cost. Every time you act from the surge and later disagree with what you did, you lose a little trust in yourself. Not dramatic trust, quiet trust. The kind that lets you believe your own decisions. When that erodes, you start second-guessing everything, which makes you slower and more anxious, which makes the next reaction worse. It compounds quietly, the way interest does, until one day you notice you no longer trust your own restraint. And the strangest cost is the reaction that worked. The time you exploded and got your way. The time you stonewalled and the other person backed off. Those successes are traps. They teach you that the fast reaction is effective, so you reach for it again, bigger next time, until the one situation where it destroys something arrives, and by then the habit is too strong to switch off under pressure. The explosion that ends a marriage often began as a tactic that once won an argument. The point is not that all reactions are bad. The point is that reactions you did not choose are costing you in ways you have stopped noticing. Once you see the cost, the pause stops feeling like self-restraint and starts feeling like self-interest. You are not pausing to be good. You are pausing because it is the smarter move, and the smarter move is its own reward. Chapter 3: Emotions are information, not instructions. One of the most damaging ideas in modern self-help is that you should suppress your emotions. The other extreme, that you should obey them without question, is just as harmful. Both produce the same result. You end up controlled by emotion, either by fighting it or by serving it. Emotions are closer to a notification than to a command. Your anger is telling you something mattered. Your anxiety is telling you something feels uncertain. Your jealousy is telling you something felt like a threat to connection. The emotion is the signal. The action is your reply to the signal. Confusing the two is the root of most emotional chaos. When you treat a feeling as an instruction, you say things like, "I was angry, so I had to say it." But anger does not authorize speech. It explains why speech felt urgent. There is a difference between explaining a reaction and justifying it. An explanation helps you understand. A justification removes your responsibility. We want the first, and we want to stop using the second. Try this reframe. The next time a strong feeling arrives, name it as data. I am feeling disrespected. That sentence is different from you disrespected me, so I will now explode. The first is a report from inside you. The second is a verdict about the other person that immediately demands punishment. Most conflicts escalate in the narrow gap between those two sentences. Emotions are also incomplete. They are fast, old, and built for survival, not for accuracy. Your fear is not a weather report. It is a smoke detector. And like a smoke detector, it will sometimes shriek because you burn toast. The feeling that something is wrong is real. The belief about what is wrong is often a guess. A mature mind learns to thank the alarm and then check the building. This is why the pause is not coldness. The pause is respect for the signal. You are not dismissing the emotion. You are taking it seriously enough to interpret it instead of acting on its first guess. The person who pauses is not someone who feels less. They are someone who trusts their own reading of the feeling more than the feeling's first impulse. A useful practice. When a strong emotion rises, ask what it is protecting. Not what caused it, what it is protecting. Anger often guards dignity. Anxiety often guards certainty. Jealousy often guards connection. When you see the guard dog instead of just the bark, you stop fighting the wrong enemy. You stop shouting at the symptom and start addressing the need. That single shift changes more arguments than any clever reply. Chapter 4. The space between trigger and response. There is an old observation, repeated in many forms, that between stimulus and response there lies a space, and that our freedom and our growth are found in that space. Whether or not the famous wording is exact, the observation is true, and it is the backbone of everything in this book. Most people experience life as, thing happens, I react. They do not perceive the space because they have never slowed down enough to feel it. But the space is always there. A reflex is fast, but it is not instant. Even a knee jerk takes measurable time. A verbal or behavioral reaction takes far more. In that time, a different choice is possible. The reason the space feels absent is training. We have practiced the fast path thousands of times. The slow path almost never. So the fast path wins by default, the way water flows down the worn channel. To make the space usable, you have to carve a second channel. That is what the rest of this book is for. Here is a useful image. Picture a busy train station. The trigger is a train arriving. Your usual reaction is to board the first train without looking at the destination. The pause is the act of standing on the platform for one breath and reading the sign. You might still board, but you board on purpose, knowing where the train is going. The space is not about being slow in life. It is about being the one who decides which train. A person who decides is calm even when the station is crowded, because they are not being pushed by the crowd. A person who never pauses is the crowd, moved by whatever arrives. What grows in that space is not just control. It is accuracy. When you act from the surge, you often act on a story your fear told you, not on what is actually happening. The pause lets reality catch up to your interpretation. Half the things we rage about were misunderstandings, and the pause is where the misunderstanding gets corrected before it becomes a wound. Consider a real example. A friend does not reply to a message for 2 days. The surge tells a story. They are angry with me, they do not care, I am being excluded. You react to that story with coldness or a passive-aggressive note. Then the friend replies, their phone was lost, their mother was in hospital, the story was wrong. The wound was real. The pause is where you would have waited, and the waiting would have spared both of you. The space is where truth gets a chance to arrive before damage does. Chapter 5. The Pause Method. This is the practical core of the book. I call it the pause method. It is not a scientific discovery. It is a memory device, 5 steps that together turn an invisible habit into a visible practice. You do not need to memorize it perfectly. You need to practice it until it becomes a reflex stronger than the old one. Perceive. Perceive the trigger and the reaction beginning. The skill here is simply noticing. Something just happened inside me. Your phone buzzed. Your chest tightened. Your jaw clenched. Name it the moment you feel it. I am triggered. That sentence, said silently, is already a pause because the part of you that can name a thing is not the part of you that is the thing. Allow. Allow the emotion to exist without immediately obeying it. This is the step most people skip. They think control means the feeling should disappear. It will not, and fighting it wastes energy you need for the later steps. Let it be there. I am angry, and that is allowed. Permission does not mean action. A wave in the ocean is allowed to be a wave. You do not have to become the wave. You understand. Understand what the emotion is trying to protect. Every strong emotion is a guard dog. Behind the dog is something it is defending. Ego, status, security, belonging, control, expectations, fear. Ask, what is this feeling trying to protect? You will often find the answer is tender, not violent. Anger at a partner's distraction is often fear of being unimportant. Criticism that burns is often old shame. When you see the guard dog instead of just the bark, you stop fighting the wrong enemy. Select. Select the response that serves your long-term interest, not the response that serves the feeling. The feeling wants release. You want a life you are proud of. Those are different goals. If I respond from the surge, what happens in an hour, in a week? That question collapses most bad options immediately. Selection is where your values finally get a vote, not just your nerves. Execute. Execute the deliberate response, or consciously choose silence when that is the better move. The pause is not a trick to make you reply more cleverly. Sometimes the right move is no message at all, sent on purpose. Execution means you are the one moving, not the emotion. Even choosing not to send the text is execution because you chose it. Practice the method as a loop, not a one-time fix. You will fail at it constantly at first. That is the training. Every time you catch yourself mid-reaction and apply even one letter, you have widened the space a little. Do that 1,000 times and the space becomes yours. The acronym is only a ladder. The goal is to climb it so often that you no longer need to look at the rungs. Chapter 6. Anger before the explosion. Anger is the emotion people most associate with losing control, so it deserves its own chapter. But anger is not the enemy. Anger is energy with a story. The story is usually, something wrong happened and someone should pay. The energy is fuel. The problem is never the fuel. It is what you set it down next to. Most explosions are not spontaneous. They are the last straw on a pile you did not know you were carrying. A harsh word from your partner lands on top of a hard day. A slight from a coworker lands on top of a sleepless week. And suddenly the reaction looks disproportionate because it is responding to the whole pile, not the last straw. This is why the same comment that you laughed off on a good day can detonate you on a bad one. Context is the real trigger, and context is invisible to everyone but you. The work here is twofold. First, lighten the pile by noticing when it is getting heavy. Fatigue, hunger, stress, and loneliness all lower the threshold. A tired person has a much smaller space between trigger and response, and they should not expect the same restraint they have on a rested day. Second, when anger arrives, use the understand step honestly. Ask what the anger is protecting. Usually it is a boundary, a value, or a fear. I am angry because I feel disrespected is data. I am angry, therefore I will destroy this conversation, is a choice the data never required. There is a myth that expressing anger fully is always healthy. Sometimes it is. Often it is just contagious. Your loud anger makes the other person defensive, which makes them angry, which confirms your story that they are the problem. You can express anger without escalating it. State the fact, state the feeling, state the need. When you interrupted me, I felt dismissed, and I need to finish my thought. That is anger with a steering wheel. And remember the body. Anger floods you with energy that has to go somewhere. If you do not direct it, it directs you. Physical release that harms no one, a walk, Gripping a pillow, 10 slow breaths discharges the fuel so the thinking brain can come back online. You are not calming down to be nice. You are clearing the static so you can choose. A person who knows how to discharge anger without dumping it on someone else is a person other people feel safe around. And safety is the foundation of every good relationship. Chapter 7. Stop taking everything personally. A large share of human suffering comes from a single habit, the automatic translation of events into statements about our worth. Someone is late, and we decide it means we are not important. Someone is quiet, and we decide it means they are angry with us. Someone disagrees, and we decide it means we are not good enough. None of these translations are forced. They are habits of interpretation, and habits can be changed. Most behavior is about the other person, not about you. The coworker who snaps at you is overloaded, not analyzing your flaws. The friend who forgets your message is scattered, not plotting your exclusion. When you assume everything is about you, you carry a weight that was never yours. The pause here is the question. Is this actually about me, or is it about their day? Not taking it personally is not indifference. It is accuracy. You can care deeply about a relationship and still recognize that the other person's mood is theirs to carry. Confusing the two is how empathetic people burn out. Boundaries are not walls. They are the simple recognition of where you end and someone else's weather begins. A practical move. When you feel stung, picture the other person as a closed book you cannot read. You are filling in the pages from your own fear. The pause lets you say, I don't actually know what this means yet. That sentence, held for a few hours, prevents more damage than any clever reply. Most injuries we nurse were injuries we invented in the silence after the event. And if it does turn out to be about you, if someone genuinely disrespected you, then you are stronger for having found out calmly. You can address it from dignity instead of from a wound. The person who does not take everything personally can still take the right things personally, and when they do, they are taken seriously because their response is measured, not theatrical. The goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to feel accurately. Chapter 8. Criticism without defensiveness. Criticism triggers defensiveness faster than almost anything because criticism feels like an attack on the self. But defensiveness is expensive. The moment you defend, you stop learning. You trade growth for the temporary relief of being right. And the other person, sensing they cannot reach you, either escalates or withdraws. Either way, the conversation dies. The pause before a defensive reply is one of the highest leverage moments in any relationship. Try a simple rule. When criticized, your first spoken word should be a question or a thank you, never a rebuttal. Can you say more about that? That's useful, I didn't see it that way. These responses feel unnatural at first because the body wants to build the wall. But they do something remarkable. They make the critic lower their weapon because the fight they expected is not happening. Separate the delivery from the content. A coworker might phrase feedback badly, even cruelly. The rudeness is their problem. The information might still be true. If you reject the whole package because you dislike the wrapping, you lose the gift inside. The understand step asks, is there a fact here I can use, regardless of how it was handed to me? Not all criticism deserves engagement. Some is projection, some is cruelty, some is noise. The pause lets you sort it. You can absorb the useful, decline the useless, and do both without exploding. A calm, I'll think about that, is a complete response to criticism you do not yet accept. You have not agreed. You have not submitted. You have simply refused to be hijacked. There is quiet strength in receiving criticism like a scientist receives data. The scientist does not argue with the measurement. They examine it. Some measurements are wrong and they discard them. Some are exactly what they needed. But first they look, because looking is how you tell the difference. Defensiveness is the refusal to look, and the cost of that refusal is that you never find out which criticisms were the ones that would have helped you most. Chapter 9. The 10-minute rule. Digital communication removed the natural pauses that used to exist in conversation. In person, you see a face, you hear a tone you have to formulate before you speak. In text, the reply box sits there blinking, and the surge goes straight to your thumbs. This is why so many modern conflicts are typed, not spoken. The 10-minute rule is simple. When a message makes you want to reply fast and hot, set it down for 10 minutes. Not forever, 10 minutes. In that window, the surge peaks and falls. The first reply you wanted to send is almost never the one you would send after the window. The rule works because it does not require wisdom in the moment. It only requires a timer. Why 10 and not 2? 2 minutes is not enough for the body to stand down. 10 is long enough for the thinking brain to return and short enough that the conversation does not go cold. You can adjust. Some people use the overnight rule for anything that matters. If it can wait until morning, let it. Sleep is the best editor of angry sentences ever invented because sleep dissolves the urgency that made them feel necessary. The rule also applies to arguments already in motion. If a text exchange is heating up, you are allowed to write, "I need a little time to think about this and I'll come back to it." That sentence is not weakness. It is the adult version of putting the game on pause. Most people fear that pausing mid-argument looks like losing. It looks like control. The person who can step out of a heated exchange and return measured is the one actually winning it. Practice the rule with low-stakes messages first, until the delay feels normal. Then, when something real arrives, the habit is already built. You will be surprised how often the reply you were sure you needed to send simply dissolves in the waiting, how often the thing that felt like an emergency at 9 at night is a non-event by 9 the next morning. The rule does not change the world. It changes your relationship to the world's speed. Chapter 10. When silence is the stronger response. We live in a culture that equates silence with weakness and the last word with victory. But silence, chosen deliberately, is one of the most powerful tools in emotional discipline. The pause sometimes ends not in a better sentence but in no sentence at all. There are moments where anything you say will be used against you because the other person is not interested in resolution. They are interested in reaction. In those moments, responding is feeding them. Silence denies them the fuel. It is not passive. It is a decision to withhold your energy from a game you cannot win. Silence also creates space for the other person to hear themselves. People who are used to being interrupted or argued with often escalate until someone finally listens. If you stay quiet and present, sometimes they talk themselves to the truth. You did not manipulate them. You gave them room, which is rarer than people think. Many arguments end not because someone won, but because someone finally felt heard, and the silence you offered was the thing that let them be heard. But silence has a dark twin, the silent treatment. That is not the pause. The silent treatment is punishment disguised as absence, meant to make the other person suffer. The deliberate pause is neutral. It says, "I am choosing not to engage right now," and it is said, or at least clearly implied, with respect. The difference is intent and clarity. One is control through cruelty. The other is restraint through strength. Learn to sit with the discomfort of not answering. The urge to fill silence is itself a reaction you can pause. Sometimes the most confident thing you can do in a room is say nothing and let the moment be. The person who can be silent without collapsing into anxiety is the person who owns the room, because they are not performing for it. Chapter 11. Difficult people and emotional bait. Some people are not interested in resolving anything. They are interested in provoking you. They push a button, watch you jump, and feel powerful when you do. This is emotional bait, and if you do not recognize it, you will bite every time and they will keep fishing. The first defense is recognition. When someone seems to know exactly which comment will set you off, ask whether they are trying to discuss or trying to provoke. Discussion welcomes your calm. Provocation fears your calm. A person who keeps escalating when you stay steady is not seeking understanding. They are seeking a show. You cannot control a difficult person. You can control whether you are the audience they need. Bait only works if someone bites. The pause breaks the mechanism. You notice the bait, you name it internally, and you decline to perform. I see what this is, you think, and that seeing is the unhook. This does not mean tolerating abuse. Some difficult people cross lines that require distance or boundaries, not patience. The pause helps you tell the difference. A calm person can say, "I'm not continuing this conversation like this," and mean it without rage. That is not biting. That is closing the door with your hand, not slamming it with your fear. The deeper freedom is this. When you stop reacting to the baiter often loses interest. The game only works if you play. Withdraw the reaction and the performance collapses. You become, to them, uninteresting to provoke, which is the safest thing you can be to a person who feeds on your loss of control. You stop being a source of supply. You become a wall they bounce off and then, bored, leave. Chapter 12. The need to have the last word. The last word feels like winning. It is usually the opposite. The need to have it comes from a fear that if you do not close the loop, the other person's point stands, or your dignity is unfinished. But conversations do not need to end with your punctuation. They need to end when they have stopped being useful. Notice the physical pull of the last word. It is a small itch, a certainty that one more sentence will finally make them understand. It almost never does. What it does is extend the conflict by inviting their last word, which demands yours, and the loop continues until someone is exhausted. The pause here is the decision to let the sentence die in your throat. A useful test. Ask whether your next words add value or add volume. Value moves the situation forward. Volume only proves you are still talking. Most last words are volume. Practice ending with a question or a simple acknowledgement instead of a counterpoint. "I hear you" is a complete sentence. It does not concede the argument. It concedes only that the other person spoke, which they did. Letting go of the last word is not losing. It is choosing where the boundary of the conversation is. The person who can stop first is the one holding the remote. The person who must have the final syllable is being controlled by the fear of leaving it open. The pause turns "I have to respond" into "I choose not to." And that choice is its own kind of victory, quieter than the one you were chasing but far more durable. There is also a practical cost to the last word that people rarely count: the relationship cost. The person on the other side remembers not the brilliance of your final point, but the exhaustion of being unable to end the fight. By releasing the last word, you may lose the illusion of winning the argument and gain something better, which is a relationship that is still standing tomorrow. Chapter 13. Why we replay arguments in our head. The reaction does not always end when the conversation does. For many people, the real suffering starts afterward in the replay. You lie in bed rerunning every line, imagining the perfect comeback, wondering what they meant, constructing speeches no one will ever hear. This is the conversation that never ends, and it is the one you are actually losing. Overthinking is the reaction continuing in thought form. The body has gone quiet, but the mind is still fighting the battle. It feels like problem solving, but it is usually looping, not resolving. A loop returns to the same point. A resolution arrives somewhere new. If you have thought about it 50 times and feel no clearer, you are looping. The pause applies here too, but it is a pause from the loop, not from the person. When you catch the replay starting, name it: "I'm overthinking." That naming is the comma. Then apply a closing ritual. Write the thought down once. Decide one small action, if any, and consciously end it. This conversation is over. I did my best with what I knew. The brain respects a clear ending more than it respects a perfect analysis. Also question the fantasy that a better response would have fixed everything. Most conversations are not lost on one line. They are shaped by months of patterns. One clever sentence would not have rewritten the relationship. Releasing the fantasy of the perfect reply is releasing a burden you were never carrying for a real reason. The perfect reply is a story you tell yourself to stay in the fight a little longer. If the overthinking is about something you genuinely handled badly, the pause turns it into repair instead of rumination. A short, calm message the next day beats 100 silent replays. Action ends the loop. Regret without action just feeds it. Send the honest note. Make the small apology. Close the loop in the real world, and the imaginary one loses its power over you. Chapter 14. Messages, Comments, and Digital Triggers. The phone is the most effective emotional trigger device ever built, and it was built without that purpose, which makes it more dangerous, not less. Notifications are engineered to pull a response. Comments are stripped of tone. Likes are engineered to feel like social survival. If you react badly online, the design succeeded, not you. A comment that would be forgettable in person becomes a wound in text, because text removes the humanity that softens it. You fill the missing tone with your own fear, and you almost always fill it badly. The pause online is the same as offline, but the speed is faster and the audience is larger. Assume every heated online reply will be screenshotted and shown to people you will never meet. That assumption alone cools most impulses. Social media rewards outrage because outrage is engaging. Your feed is not showing you reality. It is showing you what keeps your eyes on the screen. When you feel attacked by people online, remember you are often reacting to a curated highlight reel of strangers' worst moments. The pause asks, is this a real relationship, or am I arguing with a void that profits from my anger? Practical guardrails. Turn off non-essential notifications. Do not post from the surge. Use the 10-minute rule for public replies too. Mute, block, or scroll without performing. None of these are censorship. They are hygiene. You would not let strangers into your living room to shout at you, and the feed is a living room you forgot you left the door open on. The goal is not to quit the internet. It is to bring the same discernment online that you would offline. The pause does not care where the trigger comes from. A notification is just a faster version of a person, and you are still the one who decides. The most powerful setting on your phone is not Do Not Disturb. It is the one where you decide deliberately when to look. Chapter 15. How Calm People Handle Conflict. Calm people are not people who lack conflict. They are people who have made peace with it. They expect disagreement. They do not take it as a threat to the relationship. They treat conflict as a problem to solve rather than a war to win. This single shift changes everything. When calm people enter a hard conversation, they start by naming the shared goal. We both want this to work. We both care about the project. That sentence lowers the temperature before the hard part begins, because it reminds both sides they are on the same side of something. Most conflicts turn toxic when the relationship itself feels at stake. Reassure the relationship, and the issue becomes manageable. They listen to understand, not to rebut. You can tell the difference. A rebutter is already forming their reply while you speak. A listener is actually receiving. The pause helps you listen, because listening is itself a form of not reacting. A calm person will often repeat back what they heard before answering. So what I'm hearing is you felt left out. That move disarms more anger than any clever argument, because it proves the other person was actually seen. They also pick their moments. Calm people do not launch serious conversations at midnight or in front of an audience. They choose a time when both people can be present. This is not avoidance. It is respect for the conversation's odds of success. The pause includes the wisdom to wait for the right conditions, because a good message at the wrong time is still a bad message. And when the conflict ends, they let it end. They do not reopen it at the next small annoyance. They separate the one issue from the whole relationship. This is perhaps the quietest superpower of calm people. They can be angry about one thing without deciding the entire bond is broken. They hold the disagreement in a small box, and they do not let it leak into every other part of the relationship. Chapter 16. Calm does not mean passive. A real fear stops many people from practicing the pause, that if they stop reacting, they will become a doormat. That fear is legitimate, and it points to a genuine distinction. The pause is not passivity. Passivity is letting others decide for you and calling it peace. The The pause is deciding for yourself, just a moment later and with your eyes open. A passive person absorbs everything and says nothing, then resents in secret. A paused person feels everything, chooses deliberately, and says what serves the relationship and their own dignity. The outputs can look similar in the moment. Both might stay quiet, but the inner structure is opposite. One is avoidance, the other is selection. The test is whether you could act if you chose to. A person who pauses and then speaks is free. A person who pauses and never speaks because they are afraid is not paused, they are silenced. The method's execute step exists precisely for this. The pause must end in a response, even if that response is a firm boundary. Healthy assertion sounds different from reaction. It is lower in volume, clearer in language, and free of personal attacks. "I won't be spoken to that way" is assertion. "You're such a terrible person" is reaction. One draws a line, the other throws a stone. Learn the difference by listening to your own sentences after the pause. Are you describing your need, or are you describing the other person's flaw? Need is assertion. Flaw is reaction. The pause makes you more, not less, able to stand up. Because when you do speak from the pause, you are steady, and steady people are taken seriously. The reactive person is dismissed as emotional. The paused person is heard as principled. If you want to be respected in conflict, the pause is not the obstacle. It is the instrument. The calmest person in the room is often the one with the most power, because everyone else is spending their energy on the reaction, and that person is spending theirs on the decision. Chapter 17. Training Emotional Discipline. Emotional discipline is not a personality trait you either have or lack. It is a skill, and skills are built by repetition in low-stakes moments so they are available in high-stakes ones. You do not train for a marathon by running the marathon. You train by running small distances daily. The same is true for the pause. Build tiny practices. When the traffic light turns red, practice one conscious breath before you reach for the horn. When someone cuts in line, notice the surge and let it pass without the comment. These microscopic moments are the gym. Nobody sees them. That is the point. By the time a real provocation arrives, the muscle is already wired, and wiring is what separates the person who pauses from the person who only intends to. Use a trigger journal. Once a day, write down one moment you reacted or almost reacted. What happened, what you felt, what you did, what you wish you had done. 2 minutes. Over weeks, you will see your patterns in ink, and patterns you can see are patterns you can change. The journal is not confession. It is data collection on your own behavior, the most useful kind because it is honest and it is yours. Score yourself quietly. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well did you pause today? Not to judge, to notice. The pause score turns an invisible habit into a tracked one. What gets tracked gets trained. Do not aim for 10. Aim for honest. The pause and your reputation at work. We touched on reputation earlier, but it deserves a fuller treatment because for many listeners, the workplace is where emotional control is tested most often and judged most harshly. In a professional setting, people are not evaluating your feelings. They are evaluating your reliability under pressure, and reliability is built almost entirely from the pause. Consider two employees given the same difficult feedback. One reacts instantly, defends, explains, argues. The manager remembers defensiveness and, consciously or not, trusts that employee slightly less with high-stakes work. The other pauses, asks a clarifying question, thanks the manager for the input, and follows up later with a considered response. Same feedback, same competence, radically different trajectory, decided in the first 30 seconds. The pause is not politeness. It is career infrastructure. This does not mean becoming a yes machine. The pause professional can still disagree, push back, set boundaries. They do it with timing and precision. I hear the concern about the deadline. I disagree that it is achievable without cutting scope, and here is my reasoning. That sentence delivered from steadiness carries weight. The same words delivered from defensiveness sound like excuse. The content is identical. The pause is the difference between being heard and being filed under difficult. A practical habit for meetings. When something lands hard, write it down before you say it. The act of writing forces the pause and often reveals that the first thing you wanted to say was the least useful thing you could say. By the time you speak, you have selected the version that serves the room. Colleagues experience you as composed not because you feel nothing, but because you chose what to do with what you felt. The pause with children. If you are raising children, or hope to, the pause may be the most important parenting tool there is, more than any technique or method. Children learn emotional regulation by imitation, not instruction. They watch what you do when you are triggered and they become that. A parent who explodes teaches explosion. A parent who pauses teaches pausing, even without a single word about it. This is humbling because it means your own undisciplined reactions are literally shaping a small human's nervous system. But it is also hopeful because it means your practice is a gift that compounds across a generation. The child who grows up watching a parent breathe instead of shout learns, viscerally, that big feelings are survivable and manageable. That lesson is worth more than any allowance or grade. The pause with children is also practical survival for the parent. Young children are, by nature, expert trigger pullers. They are irrational, relentless, and immune to logic at the worst moments. The parent who meets this with instantaneous reaction burns out fast. The parent who pauses, even imperfectly, conserves the energy needed to actually guide the child instead of battling them. You cannot teach a skill you do not have. The pause is how you have it to give. And when you fail, as you will, the repair matters more than the failure. A parent who explodes and then later returns to apologize and name what happened teaches something even more valuable, that adults are not perfect but they are accountable. I lost my temper and that was wrong. I'm sorry. Those sentences, spoken sincerely, do more to build a secure child than 1,000 perfect calm moments. The pause includes the grace to return and repair. A 3 today that you actually saw is worth more than a pretend 10, because the 3 is real and the 10 is a costume. And recruit your body. Discipline lives in the body as much as the mind. Sleep, food, movement, and breath are the foundation the pause stands on. An exhausted, hungry, dehydrated person has a much smaller space between trigger and response. You cannot pause your way out of a body that is begging for rest. Take care of the animal and the human has more room. Mastery begins with water, sleep, and a walk, not with a philosophy. Chapter 18. The 30-Day Pause Practice. This is not 30 chapters. It is one plan divided into 4 weeks, each with a theme and a small daily action. The goal is not perfection. The goal is repetition. Do the action, notice what happens, and keep going. By day 30, the pause will feel less like a technique and more like a reflex you own. Week 1. Notice. The only task this week is awareness. You are not trying to change reactions yet. You are trying to see them. Each day, catch at least one moment when you reacted or felt the urge to. Name it. There it is. That is the whole practice. Most people go their whole lives never observing the trigger in real time. Just noticing it is a massive shift. If you do nothing else for 7 days but catch your reactions, you have already changed. Daily action. 1 entry in the trigger journal. 1 sentence is enough. Week 2. Create space. Now that you can see the reaction, practice inserting the comma. Use the 3-breath pause. When triggered, 3 slow breaths before any response. Use the 10-minute rule for messages. The aim is to feel the space physically, not just think about it. You will still fail often. That is fine. The breath is the training wheel, and training wheels are allowed. Daily action. 3 breaths before at least 1 reaction, and the 10-minute rule on any hot message. Week 3. Choose. This week, add the select and execute steps. After the breath, ask what response serves your long-term interest. Use name before action. Silently name the emotion and the value it is protecting before you speak. Try the last word test. When you feel the urge to fire the final sentence, ask if it adds value or only volume, and often let it go. Daily action. 1 deliberate response chosen from the pause, and one conscious silence where you would normally have reacted. Week 4, emotional independence. The final week is about not needing the other person's behavior to be a certain way for you to stay steady. Practice the 24-hour perspective. Will this matter tomorrow, next week, next year? Use response rehearsal. Before a known hard conversation, rehearse your calm version in advance so the pause has a script to fall back on. By now, the pause should feel like yours. Daily action. One 24-hour perspective check and one rehearsed calm response in a real situation. After 30 days, do not stop. The practice becomes maintenance. But the person who finishes this month is not the person who started it. They have a comma where there used to be a cliff. The training does not end. It becomes the new baseline, the floor from which everything else in their emotional life is built. A deeper look at the body. Before we move toward the closing of this book, it is worth spending real time on something many approaches skip. The body is not a metaphor in this work, it is the mechanism. The pause is a mental skill, but it is executed through the nervous system, and the nervous system has its own rules. If you ignore those rules, you will blame yourself for failing at something that was partly physiological. When you are triggered, your sympathetic nervous system activates. Heart rate rises, breathing shallows, blood moves away from digestion and toward large muscles. This is the readiness response, the one that prepared your ancestors to fight or flee. It is magnificent and it is completely wrong for a text message from your brother. But the body does not know that. It is preparing you to run from a predator when what arrived was a mildly annoying sentence. This is why breathing works. Slow exhales signal the parasympathetic system to stand down. You are not performing a relaxation trick. You are speaking the body's own language. The 3-breath pause is effective not because calm thoughts magically appear, but because the exhale physically tells the alarm that the threat has passed. The thinking brain returns because the body stopped declaring an emergency. Understanding this changes how you treat a bad day. If you are sleep-deprived, your threat detection is louder. If you are hungry, your restraint is thinner. If you are alone for too long, your social sensitivity is sharper. None of this means you are weak. It means the animal you are piloting is running low on fuel, and a pilot who ignores fuel is not brave, just careless. Part of emotional discipline is simply not attempting hard emotional conversations on an empty tank. A small, practical habit. Notice your physical tells. Everyone has them. The tight jaw, the hot face, the shallow breath, the foot that starts tapping. These are the early warning system, and they arrive before the thought does. If you learn to feel the tighten in your jaw as the first signal of a reaction, you get the extra second that changes everything. The body tells you first. Most people only listen after the damage is done. The myth of the perfect response. There is a quiet trap that catches even people who understand the pause. They learn to slow down, and then they use the slowness to craft the perfect reply, the one that will definitively win, explain, or resolve everything. They have paused, but they have paused into performance. They are still trying to control the other person, just with better timing. The perfect response is a fantasy, and chasing it is its own form of reactivity. It is the mind saying, if I just say it right, they will finally understand and then I will be safe. But most conflicts are not solved by the right words. They are survived by steady ones. The goal of the pause is not the flawless sentence. It is the deliberate one. There is a world of difference. Consider how often the best thing you can say is also the shortest. I need a minute. That hurt. Let's talk later. I see your point. None of these are clever. All of them are powerful because they are true and they are calm. The person hunting for the perfect paragraph is usually avoiding the simple true sentence because the simple true sentence requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels riskier than eloquence. Release the fantasy. The pause is not a way to sound smarter in the argument. It is a way to stop needing the argument to go a certain way. When you no longer need to win, you can afford to be simple, and simple is what actually reaches people. The most moving moments in real relationships are rarely the polished speeches. They are the honest, unguarded, slightly awkward truths spoken without a script. The long game of reputation. One of the quiet benefits of the pause is reputational, and it compounds over years. The person known for thoughtfulness is given the benefit of the doubt that the person known for volatility is not. When you are steady, people assume your strong reactions mean something, because they are rare. When you are reactive, your strong reactions are discounted, because they are constant. The same words carry different weight depending on the restraint behind them. This is not manipulation. It is simply how trust accrues. A friend who barely ever raises their voice has enormous impact when they finally do. A friend who shouts daily has trained everyone to flinch and ignore. If you want your words to matter in the moments that count, you pay for that by staying quiet in the moments that do not. Restraint is not just self-protection. It is an investment in your future credibility. Think about the people you trust most. Almost none of them are the ones who agree with you about everything. They are the ones who stay themselves under pressure. You know where they stand because they do not shift with the wind. The pause is how you become that person for the people who matter to you, not by being agreeable, but by being reliable inside yourself. The pause in intimate relationships. Romantic relationships are where the pause is hardest and most needed, because intimacy removes the buffering distance that strangers give each other. The person who loves you sees your rawest triggers and you see theirs. This is a gift and a danger. It means the stakes are highest exactly where your restraint is lowest. In a partnership, the pause is not cold withdrawal. It is the decision to protect the relationship from a version of you that the moment produced. Said plainly, I'm too activated to talk about this well right now. I love you and I want to do this properly, so can we circle back in an hour? That sentence contains the pause, the care, and the commitment, all at once. It is one of the most generous things you can say to someone you love, because it tells them you would rather delay than damage. The trap in intimacy is the belief that love means immediate total honesty, no filter. But honesty without timing is often just unloading. The person who loves you did not consent to be your emotional landing pad for every surge. The pause lets you be honest with yourself first, and then share only the part that builds the relationship rather than the part that vents. Intimacy is not the absence of a filter. It is the presence of a wise one. And the other side, when your partner pauses with you, do not punish it. Do not chase them with "say something" or "are you mad?" The pause is them being careful with you. Give it room. The relationship where both people can step back without being accused of distance is a rare and sturdy thing, and it is built one allowed silence at a time. The pause with yourself. We have spoken mostly about pausing before we respond to others, but there is a quieter, more foundational pause, the one you practice with yourself. The harsh inner voice that narrates your failures, the rush to judge your own worth after a mistake, the instant self-criticism that arrives before you have even understood what happened. That voice also deserves a comma. When you make an error, notice the speed of the self-attack. I'm so stupid. I always do this. I ruined it. These are reactions too, directed inward, and they obey the same mechanics as outward ones. The surge arrives, the old story fires, and you obey it before you have examined it. The pause with yourself is the same method. Perceive the self-criticism, allow it without obeying it, understand what it is protecting, usually a fear of being unacceptable, select a response that serves you, and execute self-talk that is firm but kind. Self-compassion is not weakness. It is the internal version of emotional discipline. The person who can fail without spiraling recovers faster, learns more, and tries again sooner. The person who self-flagellates spends the energy on shame and has none left for repair. The pause with yourself is how you become someone you can rely on, which is the only foundation sturdy enough to offer real steadiness to anyone else. When the pause feels impossible. Honesty requires saying this. There will be moments when the pause feels impossible. When the surge is so large, or the wound so fresh, or the person so practiced at pushing you that the comma does not come. You will react. You will say the thing. This does not mean the method failed. It means you are human and the method is a practice, not a switch. What matters in those moments is the second pause, the one after the reaction when you notice what just happened and you choose what to do next. You cannot always prevent the first shot. You can almost always influence what follows it. "I just raised my voice and I'm going to stop now and we can talk later" is a pause applied one beat late, and it still changes the outcome enormously. Do not wait for perfection to begin. Begin, and let the late pauses count too. Also, know your extremes. If a situation reliably removes your pause entirely, that is data about the situation, not just about you. Some relationships, some environments, some substances, some sleep deficits reliably strip the space away. Part of wisdom is recognizing the conditions under which you are not yet safe to engage, and choosing in advance not to. The ultimate pause is sometimes the decision not to enter the room where you know you will lose yourself. The quiet reward. People often start this work for a tactical reason: to win fewer arguments, to say fewer regretful things, to look more composed. Those are fine starting points. But the people who stay with the practice usually discover something they did not expect. The reward is not just fewer bad moments. It is a different relationship with themselves. When you know you can pause, you stop being afraid of your own reactions. The thing you feared, your own loss of control, becomes something you can touch and name and influence. That reduces a background anxiety most people carry without naming, the low hum of fear that they might at any moment make a mess of things. The pause quiets that hum. You are no longer waiting for the next explosion. You are practicing the next comma. And strangely, the people around you change too. Not because you lectured them, but because your steadiness is contagious in the way chaos used to be. Children learn it by watching. Partners relax into it. Coworkers trust it. You become the calm in rooms that did not have one, and that role, offered without arrogance, is one of the quietest forms of leadership there is. The person who can pause becomes a place other people feel safer being near. None of this requires you to be saintly. It requires you to be willing repeatedly to insert the comma. The rest builds itself, one ordinary moment at a time, until one day someone you love says something that used to detonate you, and instead you breathe and you look at them, and you answer from the part of you that is actually you. That day is the whole point. That day is the proof. Real situations, real pauses. Theory is easier to agree with than to live. So let us walk through concrete moments where the pause either saves you or does not, and what the difference feels like from the inside. These are composite scenes, drawn from the ordinary texture of a life, not from any one person. The group chat. A message arrives in a group of old friends. Someone makes a joke at your expense. It lands wrong. The old you would have fired back a sharper joke, escalating until the thread turned cold and everyone felt vaguely bad. The paused you reads it, feels the sting, names it. "I'm embarrassed and a little angry." Then considers, is this friend cruel or just careless? Probably careless. The sting is real, but the intent is not malice. You reply with a light, self-deprecating line that acknowledges the moment without weaponizing it, or you reply nothing, and the chat moves on. Either way, you are intact, and the friendship is intact because you did not mistake a careless friend for an enemy. The performance review. Your manager says something that sounds like a personal dig. The words could mean two things. The surge you hears only the insult and prepares a defense that will damage your standing. The paused you hears the words, feels the threat, and then asks the only useful question: what would I need to do differently? That question transforms a potential fight into a practical conversation. You might still disagree later, but in the room, you gather the information instead of guarding your ego. Months later, the promotion goes to someone who listened instead of someone who defended, and you realize the pause was not restraint. It was strategy. The family dinner. A relative says the thing they always say, the one that has started 10 arguments before. This year is different only if you decide it is. You feel the familiar heat. You perceive it. You allow it. You understand it is protecting a boundary they keep stepping on, and you select a response. A calm, single sentence stating the boundary, or a change of subject, or a polite exit from the conversation. You do not explode, and you do not silently seethe. You act like an adult who has been here before and has a plan. The relative may not change, but you do, and that is the only change available to you anyway. The driving provocation. Someone cuts you off. Your hand goes to the horn before your mind arrives. The paused driver feels the jerk of adrenaline and uses it as the signal, not the instruction. 3 breaths at the next red light. The cutoff is forgotten by the time you park, instead of replayed for the rest of the evening. You arrive home the same person who left, instead of an angrier one. The commute does not get to write your mood. That is a small victory, but small victories are what a life is made of. The text at midnight. A message from an ex or a colleague or someone unresolved. It lands when your defenses are down and your judgment is soft with fatigue. The surged you replies now, from the part of the brain that should be asleep. The paused you sets the phone face down and writes in the Notes app the reply you would send if you were wise, then closes it and sleeps. In the morning the draft is still there, and it is almost always something you are glad you did not send at midnight. The overnight rule is not just for anger. It is for anything whose urgency is partly manufactured by exhaustion. The pause as a relationship language. When 2 people both practice the pause, something remarkable happens to the relationship. Conflict stops being a threat to the bond and becomes a routine, manageable event. You fight, you pause, you return, you repair. The relationship is not damaged by disagreement, because disagreement is no longer treated as evidence that the relationship is broken. This is worth saying plainly, because many people fear that learning to pause will make them cold or distant in their closest relationships. The opposite is true. The paused person is more present, not less, because they are not spending the interaction fighting their own reactions. They are actually there, with the other person, instead of being hijacked by the surge, and performing a version of themselves nobody invited. If you are in a relationship with someone who does not pause, your practice is not a demand that they change. It is a gift that changes the system. When one person stops escalating, the loop often loses its energy. You cannot control their pause. You can offer them a relationship where pausing is safe, where stepping back is not punished, where returning calm is welcomed. That invitation, repeated over time, teaches more than any lecture could. The cost of never practicing. To balance the hope in this book, a frank word about the alternative. The person who never builds the pause pays a tax on every meaningful relationship, every high-stakes conversation, every online interaction. They are known as volatile or defensive or hard to talk to, and they often do not know why, because from the inside it feels like everyone else is the problem. The tax is invisible to them and obvious to everyone around them. Worse, they lose the chance to be known. When you react instantly, people stop bringing you their true thoughts because the cost of your reaction is too high. You end up surrounded by people who perform around you, tell you what you want, hide the hard truths. You feel alone inside a relationship, not because people left, but because they learned to protect themselves from you. The pause is how you become safe enough to be told the truth, and the truth, even when difficult, is the only material relationships are built from. This is not a threat. It is a description of a path, one that many good people are on without knowing it. The relief in this is that the path has an off-ramp, and the off-ramp is free, and it is available the next time the phone lights up. You are not doomed to the tax. You are only 1 comma away from a different reputation, starting whenever you decide. A note on therapy and medical care. This audiobook is a practical guide to emotional habits, not a substitute for professional help. If your reactions are linked to trauma, to a mental health condition, or to substances, the pause is a useful companion, not a replacement, for care from a qualified professional. Some patterns are too deep to be rewritten by breath alone, and asking for help is its own form of strength, not its opposite. Similarly, if you are in a relationship where you feel unsafe, the pause is not a license to stay in danger. Sometimes the most disciplined response is to leave, to set a firm boundary, to involve others. Emotional discipline includes knowing when steadiness is not the right tool and protection is. Use this book within the framework of keeping yourself safe, always. Working with each step in practice. Because the pause method is the spine of this book, it is worth sitting with each step long enough to make it usable on a bad day, when your thinking is cloudy and you need the simplest possible version. Perceive is harder than it sounds because the reaction often feels like the event. You do not think I am reacting. You think this person is outrageous and the reaction is already moving. The trick is to build a habit of a single internal checkpoint. What is happening in my body right now? The body always knows first. Chest, jaw, breath, heat. Ask the body, not the story, and you get the early signal. Perceive is the moment you become a witness to your own state instead of a passenger in it. Allow is the step people resist most because allowing a feeling feels like approving of it. It is not. Allowing is the opposite of fighting. When you fight a feeling, you are spending energy arguing with reality and the feeling, untreated, grows louder to be heard. When you allow it, you say, "You are here and that is allowed," and strangely, it often settles because it was never asking for a fight. Allowing is not weakness. It is efficiency. You stop wasting energy on a struggle you cannot win and redirect it to the choice that matters. Understand is where most people rush because understanding can become overthinking. Keep it tight. One question, what is this protecting? Not why did they do it, not how dare they, but what is the feeling guarding in me? The answer is usually one of the old protectors: ego, status, security, belonging, control, expectations, fear. Naming the protector turns a vague storm into a specific, manageable thing. You cannot solve, "I am furious." You can solve, "I feel disrespected and I want to be taken seriously." The second sentence is a problem you can actually address. Select is the bridge from feeling to future. The single most useful question here is, will I be proud of this response in a week? The week perspective cuts through almost all reactive noise. Things that feel urgent now feel small in a week, and the responses built for the small version of the feeling are usually the wrong ones for the larger life you are trying to build. Select for the life, not the moment. Execute is where intention becomes behavior. A pause that ends in no action is incomplete. Even the decision to say nothing is an action, and it should be made deliberately, not collapsed into by default. Execute means you are the one moving. You chose the words, or you chose the silence, and either way it was you, not the surge, holding the controls. Common mistakes. A few predictable errors appear when people first practice this, and naming them now will save you weeks of confusion. Mistake 1. Using the pause to suppress. Some people hear pause and decide the goal is to never show emotion, to become a polished surface with nothing underneath. That is not the pause. That is a different kind of reaction, one that hides instead of chooses. The pause is not about disappearing your feelings. It is about not obeying them blindly. You can be warm, expressive, even passionate, and still be the one choosing when and how. Mistake 2. Pausing forever. The pause is a comma, not a period. Some people use it to avoid every hard conversation, hiding behind "I need to think" for months. If you are always thinking and never speaking, you are not pausing. You are avoiding, and avoidance has its own cost, usually paid by the people who love you. The pause should end in a response, even a difficult one, in a reasonable time. Mistake 3. Performing the pause to win. Some people learn to pause beautifully in front of others, calm and composed, while inside they are seething and planning retaliation. This is manipulation, not discipline. The pause is internal first. If you are using calm as a costume to control the room, you have missed the point, and people usually feel the falseness even if they cannot name it. Mistake 4. Expecting instant mastery. The first 100 pauses will feel clumsy. You will forget. You will fail. That is the training. A person who expects to be perfect at the pause in a week quits when they are not, and quitting returns them to the old path. Treat the early failure as repetition, not defeat. The reps are the point. Mistake 5. Applying it only to strangers. People often practice the pause with coworkers and strangers where the stakes feel manageable and then explode at home where they feel safe enough to be unguarded. But the people you love most deserve the pause most because the damage lands hardest there. Bring the practice home last and bring it home intentionally because that is where it matters most. The pause across a single day. To make this concrete, imagine one ordinary day and see where the pause would live if you had it. You wake to a message from a client that something went wrong overnight. Old pattern. Immediately open the laptop at 6 a.m., fire off a defensive email, spend the day anxious. Paused pattern. Read it, feel the jolt, allow it, understand it is protecting your sense of competence. Select a response that gathers facts first. Execute by writing a calm note that you will investigate and reply with a plan by midday. The whole day changes because the first hour did. At work, a colleague takes credit for something you did. Old pattern. A sharp public correction that embarrasses them and poisons the team. Paused pattern. A private, specific, calm conversation that restores the record without a spectacle. The result is the same correction, delivered in a way that preserves the working relationship. In the evening, a partner is distracted and short. Old pattern. A fight about respect that lasts 2 hours. Paused pattern. Perceive the sting, allow it, understand it is probably their hard day, not your worth. Select a response that protects the relationship. Execute by offering closeness instead of accusation, or by giving space without punishment. The evening stays a place you both want to be. None of these are dramatic. That is the point. The pause does not make your life a movie. It makes your life yours moment by moment in the small rooms where a life is actually lived. What nobody tells you about calm. There is a last honesty worth offering. Choosing calm does not make you loved by everyone. Some people are invested in your reactivity because your reactions feed them, and when you stop providing, they may turn on you, accuse you of being cold, of changing, of thinking you are better. This is the bait again, and the right response is the same. Notice it, allow the sting, understand what it is protecting in you, select, execute. You do not owe anyone your loss of control. Also, calm is sometimes lonely before it is peaceful. When you stop performing the drama everyone expects, some relationships that were built on drama will feel the lack of it. Not every such relationship survives. That is not a failure of the pause. That is the natural consequence of becoming someone different in a system built for who you were. Some connections were only holding because of the chaos, and when the chaos goes, so does the connection. Grieve it if you must, but do not rebuild the chaos to keep it. The peace on the other side is not an absence. It is a presence, a quieter, sturdier version of you that is available in the moments that matter. The person who can pause is not missing anything. They have simply stopped spending their energy on the reaction and started spending it on the life. That is the whole exchange. Nothing is lost. Almost everything is gained. Stories of the pause. A few more scenes, because the method lives in specificity. Theory tells you the pause exists. Stories show you what it looks like when a real person actually uses it. The apology that wasn't needed. A man rehearses for days the angry speech he will give his friend who canceled plans last minute. By the time they meet, the speech is a weapon he has sharpened in his head. But when he sees his friend, he perceives his own readiness to attack, allows it, and understands it is protecting a fear of being unimportant. He selects a different opening. I missed you, and I was hurt you canceled. The friend, met with vulnerability instead of accusation, explains a family emergency he had been too ashamed to share. The weapon speech would have ended a friendship. The pause saved it, not by being clever, but by being honest before being right. The meeting that almost exploded. A team lead is interrupted for the third time in a planning meeting. The old pattern is a sharp, "let me finish," delivered with enough heat to silence the room and poison the collaboration. This time she feels the heat, breathes, and says instead, I want to hear your point, and I also want to finish mine, so let me take 30 seconds, then you. The interruption loses its power because it was not fought, only managed. The meeting ends with both ideas included, and the team learns that disagreement is safe here. Her calm was not passivity, it was structure. The parent and the teen. A father reads a disrespectful message from his son and feels the familiar explosion building. He wants to punish, to teach a lesson through volume. Instead, he texts back, I'm angry about this and I love you, let's talk tonight. The son, expecting war, receives steadiness, and the actual conversation that evening is the first honest one they have had in months. The pause did not change the son. It changed the conditions under which the son could speak. That is most of parenting and most of love. The stranger online. A comment appears under something she posted, cruel and personal. The old her would have replied with a paragraph that she would regret, and that would invite a swarm. This time she reads it, feels the sting, understands it is about the commenter's own emptiness, not her worth, and selects silence, then mutes the account. The cruelty, unfed, dissolves into the void it came from. She keeps her dignity and her evening. The internet did not win that round because she declined to play. The quiet exit. Two siblings argue at a holiday gathering about something that has been fought over for 20 years. One of them, for the first time, feels the familiar rage, perceives it, and simply says, I love you and I'm not doing this one today, and walks to the kitchen. No slam, no last word, just a calm exit that ends the loop. The other sibling, denied the fight, sits down, confused, and later, for the first time, calls to say he respected it. The pause ended a 20-year pattern in a single, unhooked moment. The pause in difficult seasons. There are seasons of life when the triggers come faster than the recovery. Grief, new parenthood, job loss, illness. In these seasons, the pause is not easier. It is harder because the body is depleted and the emotions are larger. Anyone who tells you to simply breathe through a tragedy is selling something. The pause does not erase pain. It gives you just enough space to carry it without destroying what is around you. In hard seasons, lower your expectations of yourself. You will react more. That is not failure. That is a depleted system doing its best. The practice in these times is smaller. Catch one reaction a day. Choose one silence. Breathe one extra breath. The goal is not mastery. It is mere presence, staying in the room with your life instead of fleeing it through explosion or collapse. Small pauses, repeated, still count. And lean on structure when willpower is gone. Pre-committed rules help most when you are weakest. I do not check messages after 10 p.m. I do not discuss family topics at the table. I take a walk before any hard phone call. These are pauses built into the schedule so you do not have to generate them in the moment. Wise people design their environment to make the right response the easy one, especially when their inner resources are low. The pause is not a luxury for calm people. It is a tool for loaded ones. The more life presses on you, the more valuable the comma becomes, because the cost of the reaction is highest exactly when your guard is down. If you only practice when life is easy, you will have no skill when life is hard, which is the only time the skill matters. Train in peace so you have something to use in the storm. A closing invitation. If you remember nothing else from this audiobook, remember the space. Not the techniques, not the acronym, not the exercises, though all of those help. Remember that between what happens to you and what you do next, there is room, and that room is yours. It has always been yours. You were only never taught to stand in it. Begin small. Pick one recurring trigger this week. One person, one situation, one kind of message. Catch it once. Breathe once. Choose once. That is the entire practice, repeated for the rest of your life, and it is enough. You do not need to be transformed. You need to be a little more awake in the moments that decide everything. The power of the pause is not a trick. It is a return to agency, to the simple truth that you are the one who gets to decide what happens after the feeling arrives. That return, made again and again, is how an ordinary life becomes one you are proud of, one response at a time. Final chapter, the person nobody can easily control. Imagine the kind of person others find difficult to manipulate. Not cold, not passive, not constantly agreeable, simply unrushed. When you push them, they do not bounce. They consider. When you provoke them, they do not perform. They observe. When you try to bait them into a reaction, they smile inwardly because they can see the hook and they are free to leave it in the water. That person is not born. That person is built, one pause at a time. Every time you perceived instead of obeyed, allowed instead of fought, understood instead of assumed, selected instead of defaulted, executed instead of auto-responded, you laid one brick. This book is the blueprint. The construction is yours, and it happens in ordinary moments no one applauds. The reward is not that life stops being hard. People will still be difficult. Messages will still arrive at the worst moment. You will still feel the surge. The difference is that the surge is no longer the steering wheel. You are. And a life you steer, even badly some days, is infinitely better than a life that steers you. You will forget this. You will lose your temper. You will send the message you should not have sent. That is not failure. That is practice with a long arc. The only real failure is deciding the pause is not for you and going back to sleep inside your own reactions. Do not go back to sleep. The 3 seconds are yours. They were always yours. You only had to notice them. So the next time the phone lights up or the voice rises or the comment lands, remember the space. Stand in it. Breathe once and choose. You cannot control every message. You cannot control every criticism. You cannot control every difficult person. You cannot control everything that happens around you. But there is a space that belongs to you, the moment before your response. Return to it again and again, and you become the person nobody can easily control.